There is a pattern you'll notice in people who hate having guests over. Most people assume they're antisocial. Few people realize they're protecting something far more valuable than their time, their peace. Because for some people, home isn't just a place, it's a sanctuary. A place where the mask comes off. A place where the performance ends. A place where they no longer have to explain themselves, impress anyone, respond to anyone, or be anything for anyone. And when someone says, "I'm coming over," something shifts. The reaction isn't always visible. They smile, they say, "Sure, come by." But underneath that smile, another thought appears, a quiet thought, a thought they rarely say out loud. There goes my peace. If you've ever felt that, you're not alone. And psychology suggests there's a deeper pattern behind it than most people realize. Because this isn't really about guests, it's about what home represents. Most people see behavior. Few people see the pattern behind the behavior. And once you see this pattern, the entire situation begins to look different. Think about what happens when you leave your house. The moment you step outside, you become aware. You monitor yourself, your appearance, your words, your tone, your reactions. Whether you realize it or not, part of your attention is always focused on how you're being perceived. Human beings are social creatures. We've evolved to pay attention to the people around us, to fit in, to belong, to avoid rejection. And that means being around others always requires a certain amount of energy. For some people, very little. For others, quite a lot. But home changes that equation. Home is often the only place where awareness turns off. The only place where nobody is watching. The only place where expectations disappear. You don't have to be interesting. You don't have to be productive. You don't even have to speak. You can simply exist. And that feeling is more important than most people realize, because in a world that constantly asks something from you, home becomes the one place that asks for nothing. Now imagine what happens when someone enters that space. Suddenly, the dynamic changes. The performance returns. Maybe only slightly, maybe almost invisibly, but it returns. You become aware again. You start thinking about how the house looks, whether the room is clean, whether you're being a good host, whether they're comfortable, whether you're being rude if you sit quietly, whether you're supposed to keep the conversation going. The audience is back. And even if you genuinely like the person, part of your nervous system immediately knows something important. Recovery time is over. The pattern isn't that you dislike people. The pattern is that people interrupt the environment where you recover from people. And those are two very different things. Psychologists sometimes talk about the concept of territorial comfort, the idea that certain spaces become deeply connected with feelings of safety, predictability, and control. When you're in your own environment, you know where everything is, you know what happens next, you know what to expect. Your nervous system relaxes, not because the house itself is magical, but because the environment is familiar. And familiarity creates safety. That's why a hotel room never feels exactly like home, even if it's nicer, even if it's bigger. Your nervous system doesn't care about luxury, it cares about certainty. Home provides certainty, and guests temporarily change that certainty. The routine changes, the atmosphere changes, the energy changes. Nothing bad necessarily happens, but something shifts, like a calm pond after a pebble touches the surface. The water is still there, but the ripples change everything. There's another pattern hidden beneath this one, and it's the reason many highly thoughtful people struggle the most with unexpected visitors. Most people experience social interaction as an event. Sensitive people experience it as information. Every conversation, every facial expression, every emotional cue, every shift in energy. Their minds are constantly processing, not because they choose to, because they're wired that way. When a guest comes over, they don't just hear the words being spoken. They notice the pauses, the mood, the tension, the emotional atmosphere. They're tracking dozens of things at once. And that level of awareness requires energy, a lot of energy. That's why some of the kindest people you'll ever meet secretly feel relief the moment a visitor leaves. Not because they didn't enjoy the company, because they can finally stop processing, finally stop monitoring, finally stop being on. Silence returns, and for them, silence feels like oxygen. Most people misunderstand this. They assume wanting solitude means disliking people. But solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of yourself. And some people desperately need that presence, not occasionally, regularly. It's how they recharge. It's how they think. It's how they reconnect with themselves. Without it, they begin to feel disconnected from their own mind. And that's where another interesting psychological pattern appears. People who fiercely protect their personal space often have strong emotional boundaries. Notice what that means. Not walls, boundaries. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries decide what gets in. These people aren't rejecting relationships, they're protecting balance. They understand something many people learn the hard way. You cannot continuously give your energy away without replenishing it. Eventually, something breaks. Patience, attention, emotional availability, joy. Something always pays the price. So they guard the places where restoration happens, and often that place is home. For some people, this pattern runs even deeper. Sometimes the discomfort around guests isn't happening in the present at all. Sometimes it's connected to the past. A childhood home filled with chaos, unexpected visitors, noise, conflict, pressure, stress. When experiences repeat often enough, the nervous system learns associations. Years later, the adult may no longer remember every detail, but the body remembers. Someone announces they're coming over, and tension appears automatically, not because danger exists, because the nervous system learned long ago to prepare for disruption. This is one of the strangest things about psychology. Sometimes we're responding to old patterns without realizing it. The present activates something the past created. And yet there is something important to understand here. Wanting peace is not selfish. Wanting solitude is not a character flaw. Wanting your space does not mean you don't love people. You can love people deeply and still protect your quiet. You can care about others and still value being alone. You can enjoy relationships and still crave empty rooms. These things are not contradictions, they are balance. And perhaps that's the real pattern. The people who hate having guests over are often not protecting a house, they're protecting a state of mind, a version of themselves that only appears when nobody's watching. The version that doesn't need approval, doesn't need performance, doesn't need expectations, the version that can simply exist. And in a world filled with noise, demands, notifications, obligations, and constant attention, that version becomes precious, even sacred. Most people see someone avoiding visitors. Few people see someone protecting their peace. Most people see distance. Few people see recovery. Most people see behavior. Few people see the pattern behind it. And once you see that pattern, something changes. You stop asking, why don't they want people over? And you start asking, what is it about that space that helps them feel whole? Because home was never just a building. It was never just four walls. For some people, home is the only place where they get to be completely themselves. And perhaps that's why protecting it matters so much. Because the goal was never isolation. The goal was restoration. And once you understand that pattern, you stop judging the person and start understanding what they're protecting. Because sometimes the thing people guard most fiercely isn't their home, it's their peace. And once you see that pattern, you can change the outcome.